to sit down here together and just have an ongoing, flowing discussion. Is that working? And we definitely invite you all to jump in with questions. I'm probably not going to move around the room quite as much because I just flew in and I'm tired. But please do jump in. I'm assuming many of you have questions since we have such dynamic panelists from very hot industries. I think it's great that this panel follows the panel we just heard from, because you go from hardcore, labor-intense, capital-intense, regulatory-intense businesses to the Wild West, where it costs virtually nothing to start an online company, to have an app, to have these things. You need users, and you need the ability to deliver value that people want. So it's an entirely different area, and it faces entirely different challenges. There's entirely different opportunities. So I think it's a great way to follow up what we just heard. And I'm very happy to have these two gentlemen here with me from two of the most interesting, innovative companies that are going around now. So I'm just going to start off jumping right into questions. And I think we're going to have a good discussion. And again, I welcome you to jump in and pose your thoughts and questions. So to get things started, gentlemen, why don't we talk about what you see as the biggest perceptions and misconceptions about the industry, because I guarantee you everybody in here has a smartphone and uses apps and has their view about the goods, the bads, and everything else in between.
So I think so we have two views about internet as a business, not as a medium to be entertained in the country. One view is the people like you and me who have clearly seen the benefit of internet, and second view are of those people who only read about internet benefits in the newspaper, and they have their own perception. So let me bring some of my past experience into media, into what I'm doing right now, and I'm sure Shivas will also add to it, because we both have almost similar media, telecom, e-commerce experience. Now, if we go back, let's say 5 years or 6 years, and at that point of time, most of the music was consumed through your tape recorder or CDs or something like that. And at that point of time, if you ask me that the revenue of your PPL, IPRS, the societies which give license to music, was few crore rupees. But today, most of the music is being consumed through your mobile apps or through internet or through other kind of innovative mechanism. And the revenue has increased by, I think, 10 to 20 folds. So this, I would, give it a concept of Om. In India, we all know Om chanting, right? So Om is AUM. So what I think all these companies which are into online media have done is that they have accepted the principle of Om. Om is that, they have accepted that internet is a new way to monetize the content and to reach to a mass to be entertained. U is that they have understood this particular model, how they can migrate from an offline a music consumption and music selling to online music selling. And M is that they have modified their business model. Now, when they have adopted this AUM principle in the online media to get more revenue, I think it may take some time, but I think it would be more reality where the offline retailers and offline brand stores would adopt the same AUM principle. They will accept that, yes, e-commerce is a new way to approach to a wider audience as a buyer. They will understand that how they can also participate in this wealth creation for themselves, and they will modify their business dealings to make sure that they all earn decent profits. So that's my viewpoint, and Shivas can add more on this.
Well, I think the way I see e-commerce is that we have reached a stage where it's similar to a revolution that happened in telecom 10, 12 years back. Earlier, we used to have a landline phone at home and we used to get a connection. It was a bigger issue, a challenge. Things moved and changed. Similarly, now the things have changed from an e-commerce because it's the need of the hour from various factors. The first factor I will say is the demographic trend. The youth, which is going to be the 1635 population, going to be the biggest. Second is the internet penetration. And the third is a telecom revolution leading to a smartphone culture. And last and not the least would be the time factor, people not having time. So today you have various places where people, when they are just traveling on the car or they are anywhere sitting just for 5 minutes, make their order. And they also, in majority of the cases, can also say, like in case of a grocery online, say at what time they want the delivery. I think that's one of the biggest issues. So I think as we see this, I will see as we saw this evolution happening in various other sectors. To start with, say, a manual typewriter was changed by an electronic typewriter. It was changed by a computer. The computer got changed. You had a paging business which went away because subsequent to that there was nothing. It's because mobiles, SMS were cheaper and effective. I think it's a march of technology. When one phase of technology moves, I think you have to accept that. So I think today e-commerce has become a need of the hour because people find it more comfortable to do. In the fast-paced city life, they find it easier. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is people see e-commerce as a challenge to a brick and mortar store. I don't see that way. I see as an opportunity. So today, if an entrepreneur sitting in, say, a Jaipur wants to open a shop, putting a 20 lakh business model in place, his footfall is of people sitting down in that one particular city, people coming into his shop. If he approaches an e-commerce platform, I think he gets a horizon to a larger audience. He can multiply his shop value more by reaching to them. At any time, his scale has to grow up. I think that's too important. The other aspect is, I think there's a lot of projections now. E-commerce industry today is valued around $17 to $20 billion. It will go up to some $100 billion in 5 years' time. I think it's about people seeing a value there because there's a need of the hour. I think that's the way I will put it. And everybody wants to move that way because I think it looks a lot of economies of scales in terms of I need to go to a shop, I need to consume petrol, go down, park my car, go there, buy it, come back. There's a waste of time. I think that's another aspect people have to look at, is the ease.
So these are a lot of the positives and a lot of the strengths of the good parts of e-commerce. Now, people talk about, well, e-commerce is displacing so many jobs. It's getting rid of brick and mortars. It's doing all of these things. And you made some good comments about how it's not. But how is government viewing your business? What types of challenges are you seeing there? Are you getting a lot of resistance? How are you dealing with that kind of resistance? Maybe, Shivals, you want to start?
I think the biggest challenge we are facing is how does the existing law apply to our business? Because these sets of laws were made for certain other types of sectors. So the biggest challenge I will face today is in terms of getting my licenses, whether a particular, do I need to get a trade license or a shop and establishment license in a particular locality? Because one, we have a federal structure, the state has a different, each state has a different law, whether it applies, number one. Number two is in terms of tax laws, how does it apply? So we had a case recently where if we ship a product, say from a place in Karnataka to Kerala, we pay the applicable central sales tax and ship it over there. The Kerala government feels, the tax department feels that actually we are the sellers of the goods, not the sellers who come on the platform. So the analogy is, if you go to a mall, you have around 40, 50 shops as an example. People make a sale out there and they pay the applicable tax. The mall owner actually gives them services for which he charges service tax. On the same analogy, we as a platform provide a platform for people to come and provide. We charge them a service. We provide a service to them, we charge service tax. We're not even a registered tax dealer in various states. I think the challenge is understanding how the business functions and just come to a conclusion and raising demand. So I think across all states, we have a battery of demand. We experienced this when we were in telecom, when you're putting towers, there was the issue of whether lease or license, stamp duty payable, whether it's a service or a sale of goods. I think as we go across, a new emerging sector comes, there will be challenges. It will get resolved over a period of time, but there will be some challenges in terms of revenue deposits. If you go for a taxation demand, you may have to do a pre-deposit of tax. The other aspect of challenge I see is in terms of real estate. So we would like to have a space and warehouse all the space. I think the laws are not so attuned to what you want to do. I think that are the challenges. Last challenge is logistics as a support function is very important, is next to just at the very periphery. We need a robust logistics, business and support in place for this industry to grow. That are the challenges.
So, Shivals, let me ask you a follow-up question. If you were the Prime Minister, what would you do to address those challenges that you just put out there? What laws would you change? What would you put in place?
I think it has to be a consultative process. The problem has been, I have come from a media sector where when the sector regulator came, the first thing it did was to come with a consultation process methodology. I think while at one end, a super regulator for this industry would be a problem because we already have so much of access, etc. The second aspect is Could the business or all the industry players come together, walk up and say, these are the 5 challenges, we need to address it? As you rightly say, if I take my last example, logistics, we had a comment from Mr. Sharma about why China is successful in manufacturing. It is because the government gave them the infrastructure platform. I think if you go to an economic zone, the entire roads are done, electricity, utility, everything is there. Even transportation to the nearest port is virtually free. The cost is so good. So if you put the infrastructure in place, I don't think law makes change. I think it's the infrastructure support, a certain understanding of the rules of the game will make a lot of change. So I think more than that, I think it just can't be in overnight. We can say make ABCDE will change. I don't think so. It will happen. It's a very complicated structure. We need to take it one by one and do it. I don't think there's a ready answer.
And Ashish, so do you agree with what Shrivas is saying? Do you think that there's other problems that need to be faced, and would you approach them differently?
So I think I would add, I agree with him, but I would want to add more perspective and my personal experience. So my first tryst with e-commerce started when eBay acquired Bazi in India, and it was in the year 2005. So I remember it is about 10 years back that at that point of time, I was a part of the legal team and regulatory team. So we used to approach to the various government departments, law enforcement and all. So at that point of time, they used to say, oh, these are your next door kids, who are just doing some fancy lollipop business. Okay, give them some time and have some good fun with them. The good part is that the approach of the government has changed a lot. Now, in fact, if you see the speech of our finance minister in the budget, at least, he was that far-sighted to use the word startups for 3-4 times and has allocated about 1,000 crore for startups. Who will get, for what it will get, that's a different question, but at least the mindset. And when we approach the government now, I mean, they take us seriously. Maybe I have grown old, so, they have started to take me seriously. At that point of time, they were not. That's one thing. Second part is that one is from a business operation standpoint. Let me give you some perspective from an entrepreneur standpoint, because ultimately you need to have an entrepreneur to start this business, like Mr. Bansals, Mr. Behels and all. For an entrepreneur to create wealth for himself as well as for his employees and for the people around, our law is not very modern as compared to what you see in the Western countries or your neighboring countries, let's say Singapore or Hong Kong, right? It is so difficult for you to create the wealth. Now, just one small example, which, I was grappling that issue in last few months. I would say it is so ridiculous, right? Our new Companies Act, which is supposed to be far more in favor of the industry and entrepreneurship. Just look at one simple example. A founder of the company is not eligible to get employee stock option of the company. Now, once you found the company, how would you create wealth? How would you make sure that the founder is still invested in the growth of the company at least for next 5-6 years? After that, he may choose to exit. Now, you have a roadblock for him, right? We are seeing tremendous kind of valuation growth in both of our companies. I mean, if you ask them that when they would have started their company or when we started our company, our share price would have been, let's say, at par, 10 rupees. I'm sure if we would not have excluded our splits and bonuses, the share price would have gone into multiple lakhs and crores. Now imagine you have to grant stock option to one of the employee. Let's assume you have to join a Flipkart or a Snapdeal, and we have to grant you stock option. One price of one stock is, let's say, 15 lakh rupees. The price of one stock is, let's say, 30 lakh rupees, right? Now, under the new Companies Act, how much bonus can you do? How much split can you do? Why do we have to say that the share price of a share cannot be less than 1 rupee when in the US it can be 0.00001 cents? And the same thing is with Singapore, right? So that is a second point. First point was the government has started to take us seriously. Second point, not from a business operation standpoint, but from a wealth creation standpoint, there are too much of roadblocks, right? That is why most of the new innovative companies are actually offshoring their headquarters and their wealth creation. Last but not the least, the law is also very tough for the stakeholders to sell their products on the website. One is that you have some issues in terms of logistics and all, but what if I am a mom and pop shop, right? And I want to sell some of my artifacts or grocery or something like that online, the law is so complicated that it fastens me the same liability which is there on the person who is selling. So these things, the government, to answer you, if the government were to do, I mean, something, I think the process of lawmaking, in addition to being consultative, should be with a mindset that don't make the law only to catch the criminals. You should make the law to promote the business. Look at the Companies Act. I mean, I think the 80% provisions are just influenced by 2 or 3 bad instances of, okay, like your Satyam and maybe 2 or 3 things. Those are haunting the companies which are honest and which are going to create the wealth for the entire country. So make the law to grow business. To catch the guys is okay, but 80% of the law should not be made just to catch your wrong people.
Now, when the two of you are having discussions with people in government, what can you say to them to help them understand the problem and actually take the kind of steps necessary, right? I mean, when you're in a new field, it's kind of hard to explain to someone who's used to doing something the same way. How do you get them to take you seriously and actually try to implement some of the changes you think are necessary to really make the industry thrive? Is it you highlight how much expansion there is and how good it is for the economy? I mean, what is it that's actually necessary to get these changes to happen besides just pointing out the problems?
So I think it is both internal as well as external, because in this industry of internet e-commerce, we tend to deal with very young people, right? Those who are mid-20s, late 20s, or early 30s. So they have that kind of mindset and aggression that, they feel that your regulation should not come in between my aggressive plans, right? So first is that you have to make them understand that we live in an ecosystem where we need to also make sure that our speed of growth, our speed of activity have to also comply with the law, right? So first is your internal training, and to make sure that a highly aggressive and a highly ambitious entrepreneur is also aligned with your law of the land. Having said that, I mean, if we have to, let's say, fully work under your legal regime, we may not be able to grow the way we want to grow, right? So then we have an external consultation process where we go and meet external stakeholders, right from the small bureaucrats to the highest level. And first we help them understand what is this business model and what kind of benefit it gives to the Make in India, the Indian economy, the employment and all the stuff like that, and where we feel some challenges and we say that these are the challenges which is not impacting us, which is impacting the entire country, and we give solutions. Few they accept, few they don't, because they also have some challenges to that. So that's how we approach in our organization. I'm sure that they may have their own perspective.
I think the one thing is that we need to outreach to the authorities, both regulatory and otherwise, telling us the entire story, because majority of them don't even know how this happens. So the example I just gave in terms of a taxation problem, they presume something despite being given it so clearly. So I think the next thing we can do is even take them out and say how we do the business. I think take them like a plant visit you have, you can just take them out and say how it happens. So I think there are a lot of presumptions in the mind of what they're doing. I think that needs to change. Secondly, it's very difficult to make a bureaucrat generally who doesn't understand a technology advancement, how to make them understand how things move. I think that's a big challenge, because sometimes you are meeting with, actually speaking, I think there's a big issue between our generation, the last generation, and maybe the next generation after us. I think there's a lot of gap. So I think it's so not easy to explain the technology. Even I think sometimes we find it a challenge when we look at our technical guys. So I think it's about understanding the business, both making them say how it is and outreaching to them. There won't be any easy solutions, because the laws to change in India, either one option is you say, let there be a special law for e-commerce, and it solves all the problem because we can do that. The second option is each act, it's adjusted to me, which comes through interpretations or some judicial decisions. I think that's will be a long story. So it will be a mixed approach. I think somewhere we'll outreach, we try to convince them. And as we go along, I think maybe 3 years back, e-commerce was not a happening event, so people are not looking at it. Today, I think every day's newspaper had one story or other story. So I think people are more informed. So people also are getting used to it. So I think every day we have unique visitors coming to our platforms and understanding and experimenting us. So I think as we go across, I think things will improve. But more says about, as Ashish said, is to outreach to the bureaucrats, make them understand how the business model works, because they move on certain presumptions. I think that needs to change.
So I just want to add one thing. I mean,
Please.
some kind of I would say double standard for any diplomatic word from the government standpoint. Let's take example of Uber, right? What happened very recently. So I mean, Uber is also like our website. It basically connects a person who want to take a cab and a cab driver who has a cab. It has an app. It will show where you are as per your GPS kind of location, and it connects and it facilitates online payments. Now something bad happened in one car and the entire site is stopped, right? I mean, this multi-billion-dollar business has just come to a halt, right? People were sent to jail. Now, how this application service is different when you land to a Delhi or a Bombay airport and you go to a prepaid booth, because you would want to say prepay for a taxi to go from, let's say, a Delhi airport to a Greater Kailash. The Uber app or a Ola app does the same thing in the online world, right? But when the traffic police has to operate that store in the airport or at your railway station, that does not require any registration under your Motor Vehicles Act. But a technology platform which is innovative, just because it's not understood by a few people in the government, you are sending people in jail. So I mean that is also some sort of if let's say government has to do, then the law is different for that business, but an entrepreneur has to do, then they interpret the law in a different way. So,
just to add, there's a new set of regulations that has been notified, which makes the company and the officials vicariously liable for any act such people do on such transmission.
Yeah.
I think that's...
Yeah. So so to overcome that and to take forward from the last panel discussion, I'll just give you one small example. I know one entrepreneur. He was the founder of this website dailymotion.com. It is second to YouTube here in India. So he sold that particular business and he started an online dating website called as Happen. It's a French-based site, so all the youngsters should use that. And he sits in a exotic location somewhere in the world. Sitting in that location, it is far more tax-friendly location, no kind of stupid laws that you will go to the jail. From that exotic location, he operates a worldwide business. He recently, after I think 1 year after opening the site, he recently closed his Series B round at a valuation of about $180 million, something like that, with no risk. So if let's say Shrivals and I have to open some online business, I think being a lawyer, we would be stupid to be an Indian resident and falling under the Indian jurisdiction to do that business. We would rather both go and party in some kind of exotic place and make our millions without any threat of being arrested and paying high taxes. That's why you would see businesses going outside of India. The way we are going in terms of regulation enforcement, I feel confident in next decade. I think most of the businesses would be offshore.
Well, if one of the themes of the conference is talking about Make in India, do you think that the ideas and concepts behind Make in India apply to e-commerce, either by intent or by the way things are playing out, or do you think there needs to be some shifts?
I think the Make in India, entrepreneurs still willing to make out a business model out of India. When they start a model, I think we as platforms offer them opportunity to sell. I think that's the enabling tool we can do. As ourselves, I think we see a lot of area of growth in terms of going to tier 2 and tier 3 cities. There is a lot of potential for e-commerce in India. If the Make in India concepts pulls down and makes reasonable set of laws for regulations, I think there is a huge potential for growth, both not only directly for us, but indirectly giving employment to lots of people. We do logistics services, we have warehouses. I think there are a lot of employment opportunity that comes both at a direct and indirect level. So I think there is an opportunity which needs to look at the opportunity in a more pragmatic sense to enable it rather than to curtail it.
So I think where we both as a company come to complement this vision of Make in India is that something which you make has to be sold, right? You make in India, for India, and we allow you to sell throughout India. But we need some flexible regulation, as what you said, to make sure that there is a more freedom and and more certainty to be sold across the India. Make in India for India. We make sure that both of our platform would make sure that you are able to sell also in India.
I think to add it, there is a huge diaspora of Indians across the world. If the laws of the land are not complicated, I think efforts will be made by Indian e-commerce company to make the delivery to those people also. Today, there is not a good arbitrage for us to look at that model because volumes are very high, but can we do it in a seamless manner? It's a challenge for us. So I think it all depends on how we can work on it.
So you're throwing a new business model, huh?
We have new ideas forming every minute. So to have a really successful business, you obviously have to have something people want, and clearly your companies and companies in the e-commerce space have that. You have to have a government that's not overly restrictive so you can operate and have incentive to grow. And to really scale and go huge, you have to have access to capital and investors that believe in your business. So what kinds of challenges are you seeing, not specific to your business, but in the e-commerce sector with raising capital and the perception of investing in the e-commerce space as opposed to some of the more traditional business models?
So I think if you ask me about 10 years back, I'm raising capital for e-commerce was okay. You know, people had some appetite, but the valuations were not so high. If you ask me today, I think we are at the same stage where the US .com industry was in 2000. It's like if you are begging, then people may not even give you a penny, but you say ebeg.com, then you get $1 billion valuation. So I think same is the case going on for e-commerce, but I think it is not something which is a absurd valuation. I think people have woken up to India as a potential your opportunity for a huge scale of business, right? Now, having said that, the financing for e-commerce in India, I'm sure that we all read newspapers, and most of the financing is happening through FDIs, in the sense that through foreign institutional investor, private equity players who are coming from the Western side. I am not seeing much of the risk being taken by the Indian HNIs and the big Indian industrial houses. And maybe because they are still more into the previous session of agriculture and manufacturing and all, wherein they would want to have a quick return, that if I am investing 100 rupees today, my mindset is of being a trader that I should immediately get 125 rupees out of my business. In this case, you need to see that how historically people have made money. I mean, Amazon took 15 years to earn profit. Facebook is still not profitable. And I think Facebook acquired WhatsApp by paying $20 billion. Same in the case with Instagram. You know the kind of valuation at which they get funding, we get funding, we are still burning cash. It's not that this business is dying. It's that we need to create that ecosystem. So I think the flow of money in internet in India is there. It's a huge money, right? I don't see any challenge, right? The challenge is that I'm not seeing the money coming from the big Indian houses to support new age entrepreneurs who have good ideas. Most of the time they get funding from some foreign angels and all. So if it starts to happen, then I think we will feel more Indianized than being a completely FDI company.
I think to add to that, I will say is today, people who are investing in e-commerce company in India are looking at a long-term opportunity. They feel that there is a huge appetite for this market to grow, and the gestation period for investment returns is quite long. So that's one of the aspects. We saw the success of Alibaba, how it happened. So people think there is a growth, and I think if you compare the Chinese and Indian model, I think the purchasing power of people in terms of where they are, I think there's a similar. So I think they are projecting that at that level. Having said that, as Ashish said, it all depends on are you willing to invest and what is type of liquidity and cash fund you're looking at. I think it all depends on the investors' appetite, risk, and even those foreign entities that are investing, they are spreading their portfolio across various types of businesses. It's not that they're pumping the entire money into one. They are putting money into a very, very small entity which scales over a period of time. They're putting money in ours. And it is not that all e-commerce companies are getting valuation. You need to perform also. So every investor who comes also puts a milestone that, and when we say that we want to move from a point A to point B, for next round of funding we have to prove that we have done that. Else I don't think they will have the same valuation to us. I think that's one of the important things people realize, that the growth that is happening of various e-commerce company is also in terms of the delivery on the ground. So it's not just on paper. I think that's a perception issue. I think that needs to change.
Okay. Well, I think we're reaching the end of our time. So do you have any final comments? And we'll take a couple questions from the audience.
So I think no final comments, because I think we all in this room are quite bullish about internet as a way to do business and a way to connect the people. And I'm sure that the government is also fully aligned, and they know that they have to support. That's why we are not seeing much of the intrusion of the government when we have some issues on social media website. Government still believe that the freedom of speech has to be preserved, and that let us not do too much of a regulation. I'm sure in the e-commerce, I think in next year, financial year, we would see that the law getting stabilized, the people at various level in the bureaucracy will more understand and appreciate this particular business model, and we'll have far more good regulatory system to build a large business. So I'm very optimistic about it.